Imagine giving $60,000 to save your family's farm, only to be cut from their will and erased from their story, with everything handed to your sister. But what if you held the proof to reclaim your truth? Stay with me because this story of betrayal, silence and standing tall, will hit you hard. Hi, I'm Emma. My parents once said family sticks together, but after I saved our farm with $60,000, they cut me from the will and handed everything to my sister. It wasn't just the money, it was the silence, the rewriting of history, the slow, careful erasure of me. Ever felt like the strongest one was also the easiest to betray? Before we dive in, tell me what time you're watching and where from. Drop it in the comments. Let's begin. The gate creaked the way it always had when I pulled into the gravel driveway. Dust swirled behind my old truck as I stepped out, boots sinking into familiar dirt. That Sunday afternoon in late March felt warmer than usual, like the world was pretending everything was fine. I knew better. Willow Farm never pretended anything. The creaking barn doors, the tilt in the porch, the silence between my parents, all of it told stories, and I had been part of those stories, or so I thought. Inside, the air held that blend of wood polish and coffee grounds. My mom, Margaret, was at the kitchen table, glasses low on her nose, shuffling through a cluttered stack of envelopes. "Afternoon, Em," she said, not looking up, only she still called me that. "Hey, Mom," I replied, slipping off my coat and draping it over the back of the chair I had driven in from Topeka, like I did every other weekend. Habit, guilt, duty, maybe all of the above. She gestured at the pile. "Can you help sort these? Your dad's been meaning to file our taxes, but you know how he gets. I didn't mind. Paperwork was easy, emotions." Now that was harder. I sat down across from her, sorting utility bills, bank statements, insurance forms. Nothing out of the ordinary, until it was. A thick manila envelope caught my eye, not because it was important looking, but because someone had labeled it estate transfer. My fingers paused. "What's this?" Margaret glanced up and shrugged. "Probably something from the lawyer, just sort it." I opened it. Inside was a neatly typed document, a will. I don't know what I expected to see. Maybe a list? Maybe something that split things equally between me and my younger sister, Chloe. Instead, I saw this. All assets, including property, financial accounts, and belongings, are to be transferred to Chloe Bennett upon death of both parents. And then just one sentence near the bottom. "We love both our daughters." That's it. No mention of my name, no clause, no fallback, just Chloe. For a moment, I didn't feel anything. I blinked, read it again. I checked the date, 6 months ago. My name wasn't on there, not even in the alternate beneficiaries section. I felt my ears ringing. $60,000. That's how much I'd wired from my own savings 2 years ago to stop this farm from going into foreclosure. I'd given them the money without a second thought, no loan terms, no contract, just a daughter saving what she thought was hers too. While Chloe, she'd been in Colorado back then doing some sponsored retreat, posting daily reels about farm core fashion and how wheat fields inspire inner peace. I took a breath, Mom, I said carefully, folding the will and placing it flat on the table. "What is this?" She looked up from a cable bill. When she saw what I was holding, the color drained from her face. "Oh, that you found that, huh?" I didn't answer. She shifted uncomfortably, pulled off her glasses, and tried that soft voice she used when she wanted to avoid confrontation. "You're doing well, Emma. You don't need the land or the house." I couldn't even blink. "So this is real." She hesitated. "Chloe, she's always struggled. You know that her online stuff doesn't pay steady. We just wanted to make sure she'd be secure." "And what am I asked, voice flat. "Some kind of emotional support mule with a checkbook." That's when my dad, Henry, walked in. He had that stiff farmer's gait, still wearing his mud-stained jeans from the pasture. He paused when he saw me. "What's going on?" "She found the will?" Margaret said quickly, not meeting my eyes. Henry sighed like I was overreacting. We didn't mean for it to be a surprise. Then why didn't you tell me? I asked, jaw tightening. He rubbed the back of his neck. It's complicated. No, it wasn't. You didn't think I deserved to know that I'm not in it at all? You don't need it. My mom whispered again, as if repeating it made it truer. You're the strong one, Em. You always were. And there it was. Strength as a punishment. All those years I pulled double shifts, drove 6 hours in snow, just to repair the busted well pump, sent money when Chloe forgot the insurance deadline. None of that counted as love. It counted as independence, as immunity from being considered. You used my strength to justify cutting me out, I said slowly. Margaret's hands trembled. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I said, standing. I remembered the day I wired the money, walking into the bank in my muddy work pants. The teller's eyes widening when she saw the amount I told myself back then. Family first, always. But that only worked if family meant me too. I looked at both of them. One wouldn't meet my eyes, the other pretending like all of this was too nuanced for conversation. I folded the will back into its envelope and placed it in the middle of the table like a declaration of war. Thanks for showing me where I stand. Margaret flinched. Henry didn't move. I grabbed my coat, turned on my heel, and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't even look back. I got in my truck, started the engine, and pulled out slowly. The sun was setting behind the silo, casting long shadows across the gravel. Halfway back to Topeka, my phone buzzed. I didn't check it. I hadn't deleted their numbers yet. It wasn't mercy. It wasn't hesitation. It was exhaustion. Somewhere in the haze between fury and fatigue, I'd let the texts come. I didn't respond. I didn't block. I just let them pile up like dust on windowsills, annoying, inevitable, but easier to ignore than to clean. I sat cross-legged on my worn couch, the soft hum of my refrigerator the only sound in my one-bedroom apartment. The lights were off, save for a single lamp in the corner. My phone buzzed on the coffee table again. Missed call Dad again. The name didn't sting the way it did last week. Now it just felt distant, like someone I used to know. I picked up the phone, not to answer, but to silence the vibration. The second I did, a new message blinked on the screen. Property taxes are due. Friday. Can you send the transfer? No greeting, no context, just a demand dressed as routine. I stared at it, my mouth curling into something that wasn't quite a smile, closer to disbelief. It was almost funny. Almost. I tapped the screen. My fingers hovered. Then I typed, I think Chloe can handle it. The house is hers now, right? Sent. No punctuation, no warmth. Just the same sterile tone they'd used with me. I set the phone down, stood up and walked to the kitchen. I needed a glass of water, not because I was thirsty, but because I needed to do something with my hands. Something grounded. Before I could turn on the tap, the phone buzzed again. Mom, I let it go to voicemail. Then came the texts, one after another, like a chorus of guilt in digital form. Please don't do this. We need to talk. We just wanted your sister to feel secure. I leaned against the sink, letting the cold faucet run into my empty glass. The sound reminded me of the night I wired the 60 grand I'd been in the same kitchen. My fingers trembling as I typed the transfer info. I didn't ask for interest. I didn't draft a document. I just did it because that's what family was supposed to mean. Now I was being painted as the villain. Another buzz this time. A longer message. She's been feeling like you looked down on her, Mom wrote. We just wanted her to feel equal. You always make her feel small. I stared at the words, reading them over and over. So that was the story now. Not that I saved the farm. Not that I worked 2 jobs, while Chloe chased camera angles in sunflower fields. No, the story was I made her feel small. Twist the knife. Why don't you? I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my banking app and stared at the list of automatic drafts I'd been too tired to cancel last week. One for the electric bill at the farm, one for the feed supplier, one for the septic service. I deleted all three, no hesitation this time. Then I opened a note on my phone and wrote, "You are not required to light yourself on fire to keep others warm." It wasn't poetry, it wasn't new, but right then it was mine. The phone buzzed again, different number. I almost ignored it, but something made me check Mr. Thompson. He'd been our neighbor for over 2 decades back in Willow, used to bring over sweet corn in July. His wife passed last winter. I hadn't heard from him since the funeral. The text was short. "Hope you're doing okay. Heard you're not in the will." That's rough. Chloe mentioned it at the diner last week. Word gets around, I blinked. So it wasn't just betrayal, it was public betrayal. The kind people whisper about over coffee and chicken fried steak, the kind that turns into small-town folklore where the hard-working daughter gets cut out while the influencer sister preaches authenticity over biscuits and gravy. I clenched my jaw. My hands shook, but not from sadness anymore. There was rage, yes, but under it something sharper, something cleaner resolve. I texted Mr. Thompson back. "Thanks, I'm okay I wasn't. But I would be, because silence wasn't working anymore." I walked back to the couch and stared at my phone. It buzzed again. "Chloe?" I didn't even need to open the full message. The preview line said, "Enough, are you seriously doing this?" Doing what? Setting boundaries? Stopping the handouts? I hadn't said a word to her, and already I was the bad guy in a story she was writing without me. I let the message sit on the lock screen. Then without unlocking, I whispered to the empty room, "Yes, I'm seriously doing this." Because no one else was going to do it for me. I read Chloe's message twice. "Are you seriously doing this?" I leaned back into the couch cushion, the tension in my shoulders slowly rising like steam from a cracked pipe. I didn't respond right away. My fingers hovered above the screen as I let out a tired sigh, then typed back 3 words that cost me more than she'd ever know. "Yes, I'm done." I placed the phone screen down on the coffee table. I didn't need to see her typing bubbles. I didn't need another manipulative guilt spiral. I had already spent too much of my life apologizing for existing louder, stronger, more responsibly than her. I turned on my laptop to distract myself. Maybe a documentary or some photos of plant samples from last month's soil testing trip would calm me down. Instead, the universe served me one final slap. I opened Facebook, and there it was. Top of the feed, a party. No, a full-on celebration in our childhood backyard. Streamers, a bonfire, fold-out chairs, and a banner strung across the barn that read, "Thank you, Chloe." In the photo, Chloe was standing next to Mom, who was handing her an envelope. Both were beaming arms locked together like a Hallmark ad. And the caption, "So proud of our girl. She saved the farm." It didn't compute at first. I stared, blinking slowly, thinking maybe I'd misread something, but the post had over 200 likes. Family, friends, neighbors, even our old church pastor had commented things like, "Such a strong woman, and you deserve it all, Chloe." That's when I realized the date of the photo 2 weeks ago. The exact weekend, I transferred $60,000 from my emergency fund to cover the balloon mortgage payment. My throat went dry. My hands clenched into fists. They took my help and turned it into her legacy. I clicked on the photo again. My name wasn't mentioned once, not even a small note like with family support or thanks to a joint effort. Nothing. I didn't even exist in their rewritten history. I slammed my laptop shut, not from impulse, but from instinct. If I didn't close it, I would have hurled it across the room. I stormed into the kitchen, needing to move, needing to breathe. I opened the fridge, stared at a bottle of iced tea, then shut the door again. No appetite, just that bitter taste of betrayal that had become all too familiar. I reached for my phone and opened the banking app. I scrolled to the section labeled Scheduled Payments. The farm's electric bill, the septic service, and the monthly draft labeled Agri South Mortgage, co-signed Bennett Property. Still there, still draining from my account, I tapped into the loan documents. The digital signature glared back at me, mine on the dotted line beneath the farm's deed. I'd signed it a year ago when the bank wouldn't approve refinancing under Chloe's name alone. She had no credit, no job history, no assets, but I did. They called me the rock, the steady one, the safety net, and now apparently the invisible one. The phone buzzed again. Incoming video call, Chloe. I should have let it go to voicemail, but something in me snapped. I answered. Her face filled the screen. Tears already on her cheeks, voice climbing before I could even say hello. Why are you doing this, Em? You're blowing everything up. Do you have any idea what people are saying? Why can't you just be happy for me for once? I didn't yell. I didn't flinch. Instead, I spoke slowly. Whose name is on the mortgage contract? Chloe. Her mouth hung open, eyes darting. I didn't ask you to do that, she finally said, wiping at her face. Like that absolved her. And just like that, she erased me as if my sacrifice had been a favor I imposed on her. No, you didn't, I replied coldly, but you sure had no problem accepting the credit for it. Silence. For a second I thought the call dropped, but no. She was just stunned. Mom said it would look better this way. She finally whispered, "People don't understand the technical stuff. Nobody needs to know the details." No, they don't. I agreed, but I do. Then I hung up. Not with rage, not with drama, just with the tired certainty of someone done playing the role of silent benefactor. I stood there in the kitchen, one hand on the counter, the other gripping my phone so tight my knuckles whitened. A memory flashed back, uninvited me at my desk in the middle of the night, blinking away exhaustion as I reviewed wire instructions line by line, the loan officer on the phone saying, "You're saving this place." Mom calling me the next morning, voice soft, with something almost like pride saying, "We don't deserve you, sweetheart." Apparently they were right, because now according to everyone else they'd save themselves. I walked back into the living room, sat down, opened the banking app again. My finger hovered over the auto payment setting. My thumb shook slightly as I reached for the option. Pause recurring draft. Yes, I didn't flinch when I hit cancel. The auto payment vanished from my bank dashboard like it had never existed. The only thing more invisible was me. For the first time in weeks, my shoulders lowered a fraction. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was space. And space was the first step toward freedom. The silence didn't last long. That afternoon, while rinsing out a coffee mug, my phone buzzed against the counter. It was a message from Sarah Miller, the event coordinator from Willow. I hadn't seen since last fall. Strange. She usually only reached out about seasonal charity drives or church fundraisers. I dried my hands and opened the message. It wasn't from her, it was a forwarded video from the Willow Neighbors Facebook group. I tapped play. The image came into focus, a trimmed lawn, folding chairs under a tent, and a banner strung between two trees, community brunch honoring local heroes. My stomach tightened before I even spotted the podium. Chloe stood behind it, hair-curled dress, floral smiling like the whole world revolved around her. Next to her stood Councilman Rogers, reading from a plaque. In recognition of Chloe Bennett's selfless financial contribution and unwavering dedication to saving Willow Farm, we proudly present... I paused the video. My hand shook as I set the phone down. I hadn't been invited. I hadn't even known it was happening. And now I was watching my own story rewritten in real time. Not a single mention of me, not a footnote, Not even with help from just Chloe, smiling wide as the crowd clapped and cameras clicked. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe. I had thought the betrayal was over. I'd made my decision set. My boundary cut the cord. But they hadn't just accepted my help. They'd repackaged it, rebranded it, replaced me in it. I reopened the video, forcing myself to watch it through. I needed to see what else had been taken. They'd edited everything. The scene where Mom once handed me the deed papers gone. The photo by the barn where I'd stood holding the loan folder explaining terms to Dad, gone, cut, cropped, revised. I scrolled through the comments. So proud of you, Chloe. You're such an inspiration. We need more young women like you. Saving our land. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. Instead, I scrolled through our old family photo album online, that Thanksgiving shot by the tractor. I'd been in the original, hand on Dad's shoulder. In this version, I was gone, as if I had never existed in any of it. I sat in the dark for what felt like hours, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. My thoughts spiraled, jumping between disbelief and something colder, recognition. This wasn't new. I remembered Dad last year after I'd voiced frustration about Chloe missing the barn roof repairs again. She just needs encouragement. He'd said no, she didn't need encouragement. She needed an audience, and they gave it to her on my shoulders. They took my sacrifice and built her stage with it. They turned my silence into a spotlight for someone else. I stood slowly and walked to my bookshelf, pulled out the dusty black journal I hadn't touched in months. I opened to a fresh page and wrote, "You can edit the footage, but not the facts." Then I grabbed my laptop. I started a new folder in Google Drive, Willow Farm. Inside, I dropped screenshots, bank receipts, scanned contracts, the wire transfer email thread, a photo of the deed with my signature on the loan, even the late-night text to Chloe that read, "I sent the 60. It's covered. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about reclaiming what was mine, the truth." My truth didn't need applause. It needed documentation. I sat back rereading every line. My hands felt steadier. Now I didn't know what I would do with the folder yet, but I knew this. If they wanted to erase me, they'd have to try harder because I was done shrinking. My phone buzzed again from Mom, "Sweetie. Don't make this into something ugly." I stared at her words, a familiar script. "Sweetie, don't. Ugly translation, stay quiet. Let her have the glory. Don't embarrass us." But I wasn't the one who'd made it ugly. That happened the moment they decided I didn't exist. I didn't answer my mother's message. I didn't need to. Instead, I clicked back into the Google Drive folder where everything sat untouched. My quiet digital archive of truths. I began renaming each file by date source and purpose. Wire transfer, Waro 327 PDF, loan agreement, Waro 415 PNG, email, Mom no, subject, threat tone docs. It wasn't revenge, it was preparation. Half an hour later, I found myself staring at the $60,000 wire transfer receipt again. There it was, receipt number 4183, timestamped 11:46 a.m., March 27th. Just under that, in the exact same email thread, sat a forwarded Facebook screenshot. From that day, my mother had posted a photo of Chloe standing in front of the barn with the caption, "Proud of our girl for stepping up when it mattered most." That was the same moment my money hit the account. The timeline wasn't a coincidence, they knew. They had always known, and they were already erasing me, even as the funds arrived. The worst part wasn't even the rewriting. It was the intent behind it. They hadn't just let it happen, they orchestrated it step by quiet step. I exhaled through my nose and typed receipt 4183 into the file name bar. Then I opened my email, searched thank you, nothing farm. A request for a payment reminder, loan only, a message from Mom reading, "Hope you can get this done before Friday." Not one expression of gratitude, not from her, not from Dad, and definitely not from Chloe. I sat back in my chair. The apartment felt colder than usual, or maybe I was just beginning to thaw out from the years of numbness. No gratitude, no recognition, no. We couldn't have done this without you. Just transactions, just expectation. That was the twist, the thanks that never came. I cracked my knuckles and began typing. Subject line receipt. 4183 to Chloe Bennett. CC Margaret Bennett, Henry Bennett Body, hi Chloe. Just confirming I've removed myself from all future farm-related transactions. Please update your autopay and legal responsibility records accordingly. You should be able to coordinate directly with the bank moving forward. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. I hit send. The moment I did, my chest trembled, but not from fear, from release. It was the cleanest boundary I had ever drawn, and it came with a paper trail. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the streetlights were flickering on in quiet succession. A couple walked past, holding hands and laughing about something only they could hear. I wondered for a second what it might feel like to be understood without needing to prove it. And then I sat back down and cried, not from regret, but from grief. Not because I wished I hadn't sent the email, but because part of me had still hoped. Despite everything that someone might call. Someone might say, you mattered, we saw you. We knew it was you all along, but no one called. I wiped my face and picked up my phone. No new messages, just the stale silence that had become familiar, until 20 minutes later, it buzzed. It was a notification, an Instagram story from Chloe. I hesitated before tapping. The image loaded a candle-lit corner of the farmhouse kitchen. A wine glass, half full, her fingers visible near the rim, delicate and carefully posed. The caption read, some people are only generous when it's quiet. Once they're loud, it was never love. I stared at it for a full minute. That was her warning, a passive jab wrapped in faux poetry, an accusation designed to flip the narrative again. She wanted me to feel guilty, to fall silent, to crawl back into the role of silent benefactor while she stood in the spotlight. But I was done shrinking. I didn't reply to Chloe's story. Instead, I stared at the caption, her clever little dig, and let it settle like dust over everything that had already cracked inside me. Some people are only generous when it's quiet. It sounded like a proverb for the gullible, but to me it was just a weapon dressed in silk. That Saturday evening I sat curled up on my couch, lights dim scrolling through my feed. My thumb froze mid-swipe when I saw it tagged under my mom's latest Facebook post. Sad. When those closest to you forget where they came from. The post wasn't addressed to me by name, that was the magic of manipulation, but the comments didn't hold back. She was always distant, huh? Some people change when they make a little money. She must have thought the farm was beneath her. Then, right below a photo Chloe posted of herself smiling in front of the barn, captioned, everything they do is performative. I felt my jaw clench. The word performative hung like smoke poisoning everything I'd done for years in silence. She was flipping the script, turning my restraint into artifice. My sacrifice into a vanity project, that was the twist the feed turns. For a moment, I couldn't decide if I was more angry or heartbroken, but then it got worse. As I clicked through old memories, I noticed the changes tags disappearing. Captions rewritten. The post I'd written 2 years ago, sharing the renovation of the North Barn. Gone. A quote I had written on the farm's donation site. One my father said he was proud of vanished. Even old family photos where I stood proudly with mud-stained boots and a sunburnt smile were suddenly cropped just enough to make me disappear. It was happening in real time, not just gaslighting digital exile erasure. In real time, I closed the laptop, then reopened it. And this time I didn't log in to scroll. I logged in to speak. My Facebook page had been silent for months. Just the occasional birthday, like her holiday post. But now it was a war room. I uploaded a screenshot of the wire transfer, receipt 4183, then typed just one line beneath it. I didn't need credit, but I won't accept erasure, receipt 4183. That was it. No dramatic flair, no sob story, just facts. The post was live for less than 10 minutes before the comments started pouring in. Wait, you were the one who paid that? I remember seeing you in the freezing rain, hauling lumber behind the barn. You never said a word about this? Messages trickled in from former classmates, an old neighbor who once borrowed a generator during the blackout, even Mr. Thompson from down the road. I always knew you were the reason they stayed afloat. By the end of the night, it had over 200 comments and shares, not viral by internet standards, but viral for Willow, and not a single word from my family, not even denial. That silence, it was louder than a scream. Sunday morning, I woke up to find that Chloe had restricted my access to her page. Her stories, her highlights gone. I'd been shadow removed from the curated narrative of her perfect influencer life. And my mom, she had unfriended me. It was petty, but it was confirmation. They weren't interested in healing. They weren't embarrassed by their actions. They were only ashamed they'd been caught. And my father still silent, the silence of a man who could have stopped this before it started but never did. For once, I didn't chase it. I didn't text to ask why. I didn't call to clarify. I closed my notifications and sat with the stillness, not the kind that aches, but the kind that marks the edge of a new boundary. Let them sit in the curated echo chamber they built for themselves. I had truth, I had proof, and now I had a voice. As I logged off for the night, a new notification popped up, a direct message from someone I hadn't expected. Local News Weekly. Hi, Emma. I came across your post about the farm. Would you be open to sharing your side of the legacy? I think people would want to hear it. I stared at the screen, then smiled, slow measured. If they wanted the public sympathy, they should have stayed quiet. I was just getting started. I hadn't even finished reading the DM from the reporter when my phone pinged again. This time, it was a message from Mrs. Clara, our elderly neighbor back in Willow. She never texted, she called, or dropped off pies with scribbled notes. So seeing her name alone gave me pause. Your parents want to meet in person, it read. That was it. No emojis, no soft cushioning, just a quiet warning dressed as information. I let the screen go dark in my hand and stared at the wall. It was coming. The confrontation I knew was inevitable. But this time, I wasn't walking into that house empty-handed. The next morning, a note appeared beneath my apartment door. The handwriting was unmistakably my mother's, "Oh, Emma, if there's anything left between us, come to the farm." Thursday. One last time, I folded the paper carefully and set it beside my laptop. I didn't cry. I didn't feel moved. I just felt like someone being summoned to their own trial. I pulled up the will, the copy they didn't know I had one. I'd scanned months ago while helping with paperwork, the one that left me out of everything. Then I printed it and printed the bank receipts, the transfer confirmations, the invoices, the old emails. When I zipped them into a neat leather folder, I realized I wasn't preparing for a reunion. I was prepping an exhibit for a court that would never admit guilt, but I'd stopped pretending I owed silence to Thursday arrived gray, and still Willow hadn't changed. The farm hadn't either, same creaky gate, same chipped white paint. But everything felt smaller. Even the house, once massive in my memory, seemed like it was shrinking into itself. Mrs. Clara waved at me from across the street. I nodded politely, then walked up the porch and knocked. My father opened the door. He looked tired, not older, just worn down in a way that suggested a life built on too many silences. "Come in," he said. No hug, no smile. I stepped into the dining room. It was already set with coffee mugs, napkins, even a pie. I knew none of them had baked. Chloe sat to the right, arms crossed, scowl loaded and ready Margaret. My mother sat at the head, her posture perfect, her hands tight on her lap. "We just want to clear the air," she started. My father added, "You airing things online, it's made things harder for us." I laid the folder on the table, opened it slowly, and spread the contents out like evidence. This isn't about what I posted, I said evenly. It's about what you did long before. I said a word. I turned the will around so they could see their own signatures, then pointed to the wire receipt with the timestamp matching my mother's Facebook post celebrating Chloe. Chloe shifted in her seat, but didn't speak. I wasn't done. I pulled my phone from my purse and tapped the recording app. Hit play. Chloe's voice filled the room. You're the one who paid for it all. I just thought they'd never take your side. Silence. Then a shallow inhale from my mother, her eyes darting, unsure where to land. My father pushed his chair back. What is this, a setup? No, I replied. It's accountability. Margaret reached forward, trembling. You're tearing this family apart. I looked her straight in the eyes. No, I'm holding it together by telling the truth. Something you've avoided since the beginning. Chloe stood. You think this makes you noble? I think it makes me sane. She shook her head. You're toxic, Em. You've always needed a villain to feel relevant. That landed like a slap, but I didn't flinch. You know what's toxic. Rewriting history and pretending it's healing. My father walked out without a word. I didn't follow. My mother started to cry, not because of guilt, but because exposure doesn't feel graceful, and Chloe just glared. You're destroying this family, she whispered. I stood tall, folded my folder shut and said, No, I'm just done letting it destroy me. As I walked out, I didn't expect applause or apology or redemption, just distance. That was enough. Before I reached the car, my phone vibrated again. A new email sat in my inbox, subject line. We'd like to feature your story in our series on financial abuse inside families. I sat behind the wheel, watching the house grow smaller in the rearview mirror. For years, I stayed quiet to protect them. Now I would speak to protect myself and anyone else watching. 2 days after the confrontation at the farm, I found myself sitting in the quiet waiting area of the local news studio, clutching a paper cup of lukewarm coffee that I hadn't touched. A flickering TV in the corner played the midday segment, cheerful updates about spring flower festivals and upcoming bake sales. It was surreal, almost laughable that my story would be next. The receptionist gave me a polite nod. They'll bring you in shortly. I nodded back quietly. I hadn't told anyone I was coming here. Not coworkers, not friends, not even the few distant cousins who had messaged me privately after the Facebook post about the farm. I wanted to do this on my own, without anyone watching to either applaud or warn me. Minutes later, I was seated across from Lisa Carter, a local anchor known more for charity fundraisers than hard-hitting interviews. But today, her voice carried weight. The cameras rolled, lights brightened. Her first question came softly but squarely. What does it feel like to be erased by your own family? I didn't blink. It doesn't feel like anything at first. I said, it's quiet, it's subtle. One day they stop mentioning your name. Next, your photos are missing from frames. Then the things you paid for become someone else's victory. It's like dying in slow motion, except you're still paying the bills. I didn't cry, I didn't flinch, my voice didn't tremble. I spoke about the loan, the co-signed debt, the receipts. The years I'd spent making sure the farm didn't fold while my sister turned it into her online branding playground. I spoke about my parents' silence, not out of malice, but a belief that love meant sacrificing one child to save another. And then I said something I hadn't rehearsed. They taught me that being the strong one meant staying quiet. I've unlearned that now. The interview wrapped after 10 minutes, but I knew from Lisa's expression that it would be one of the most shared clips of the week. By nightfall, it was everywhere. On Facebook, people tagged friends, "This is it." On Reddit, a thread exploded under rural family scandals. Hundreds of comments poured in. "This is my life. I co-signed my parents' mortgage and got written out of their will too." She said what I've never had the guts to say. For the first time since all of this began, I didn't feel like a freak anomaly. I felt like a thread in a vast tapestry of people who had given everything to family and received ghosting in return. Strangers became a mirror. I wasn't alone. Chloe, of course, had her own version of response. She posted a muted Instagram story showing her sipping coffee in a farmhouse kitchen captioned, "Some people really love drama. No names, no context, just enough venom to keep her loyal followers on her side." My mother, she deactivated her Facebook entirely by Sunday morning. Her last post before everything disappeared was a blurry photo of a quilt and the words, "Some bonds are better left in the past." My father's number finally sent a text, just one line. "Don't contact us again." I stared at it for a long moment, then deleted the thread. I didn't feel gutted. I didn't feel victorious either, just clear. I wasn't chasing anymore. That night I sat by the window of my apartment watching the streetlight reflect off parked cars. The silence felt different now. Not heavy, not aching, just real. I opened my laptop and logged into the blog I hadn't touched in over a year. Created a new post, titled it "The Invisible Daughter." I didn't rant, I didn't name names. I wrote about silence, about loyalty, redefined about the weight of unacknowledged love, about how it takes years to realize you were never asking for praise. Just presence. You don't have to scream to be heard. I wrote, but you do have to stop whispering. I hit publish. A few minutes later, my email dinged. It was from a nonprofit I'd never heard of. Subject: invitation to speak at our spring summit on financial abuse within families. The message was short. "We saw your interview. Your story is powerful. Would you consider sharing it with others going through the same thing?" I leaned back in my chair, heart steady. Maybe I was never meant to save the farm. Maybe I was meant to save myself and others like me. 3 weeks later, I stood backstage at the Spring Summit Hall watching the crowd shuffle into their seats. The walls were lined with soft banners that read, "Redefining Family, Reclaiming Voice." Just beneath the stage lights, my name appeared on a screen in serif white letters. Keynote speaker Emma Bennett. I exhaled quietly. Behind me, a volunteer adjusted my mic. "You're up in 2, she whispered. I gave a nod, hands calm on the note cards I'd written and rewritten for days. But by the time the announcer called me forward, I didn't glance at them once I stepped onto the stage. The room, dozens of strangers from different states, lives, families, fell still. The hush wasn't nervous, it was reverent. I took a breath. I used to think being a good daughter meant being quiet. My voice was steady, not because I wasn't nervous, but because I wasn't ashamed. I used to believe that if I gave more, loved, harder bent, further, maybe they'd see me. And when they didn't, I assumed I hadn't earned it yet. A ripple moved through the room. Heads nodded, arms folded tighter. I met eyes with a woman in the front row, early 40s. Soft curls, hands clenched around a tissue. She was already crying. She didn't try to hide it. But silence doesn't equal peace. I continued, and sacrifice doesn't guarantee love. The silent apology wasn't in the mail or in anyone's inbox. It was in this moment, this room, this response. The crowd rose to their feet before I could say the last line. For a minute, I couldn't even see the podium, just a sea of people clapping like they needed to remind themselves it wasn't too late to stop giving their best to people who couldn't say thank you. After the talk, I stayed near the side of the stage as people came to me, some hesitantly, some like they were meeting a sister they'd never had. A few just said, "Thank you." One woman gripped both my hands and whispered, "I left my family's farm last year, but I still cry when I see tractors." I understood her without needing more words. Another asked, "How did you finally know it was time to stop helping them?" My answer came easier than expected when I realized I was the only one helping at all. Later that week back at home, I found a certified envelope waiting in my mailbox. The name on the return address stopped me. Margaret Bennett, my mother. I brought it inside and sat it on the kitchen counter. I stared at it while the kettle boiled. I thought about tearing it open. Then I slid it into the drawer next to my checkbook and closed it without a word. Some letters aren't meant to be read. Some apologies aren't meant to be unpacked. The silence between us was an answer in itself. 2 days later, I opened the doors to a new space I'd been quietly building for months, a co-working hub for women in transition divorcees, survivors, single moms, founders, artists. Nobody needed to explain why they were there, only what they needed next. On one exposed brick wall, we'd painted a quote in bold cream letters, "Be your own proof." Mid-morning, as I was wiping down a table near the back, a familiar voice called out, "Well, look what you built instead of a barn," I turned. Mrs. Clara stood at the threshold in a cherry-red cardigan holding a bouquet of sunflowers. "I always said you were the root that kept them from floating away," she said. "Now I see you were meant to plant your own field." I smiled, and this time it wasn't one I had to force. I hadn't saved Willow Farm, but I had saved something better myself. The last part of the day passed quietly. I closed up the workspace around 5, then headed upstairs to the small loft where I'd moved recently. Simpler than my old place, but full of light. The sun was beginning to dip outside the window. I stood with a mug of chamomile watching the golden light stretch long across the floorboards. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone's text. I wasn't hoping for an apology that would arrive too late or land too shallow. I was enough, not just barely enough like whole, enough like home. Sometimes the deepest betrayal comes from the silence of those we call family. Emma's story shows us that speaking your truth isn't about revenge. It's about survival and rebuilding. Have you ever had to walk away from family to protect your peace? Share your story in the comments. I read everyone. If this moved, you hit that subscribe button for more raw, real stories that cut through the noise. Let's keep shining our light together.